And we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's almost our last meeting this year because we just have one. Before we go to our panelist and our speaker, let's do some quick announcements. So if you're looking for us, the Dutch Angular Group, if you want to do a talk with us, join us on our Slack or on Discord. It's the Angular Discord, the one I think everybody's on these days. And we're also on Angular Nation. You can DM us, follow us on Twitter, or contact one of the panelists. They will help you get you booked on our show next year, I think. And a special day today because we can give away a couple of licenses around Wallaby AS and Quokka. And Sander, the last time we always also did a giveaway. Could you just give a quick introduction to Wallaby for our viewers?
Wallaby is a tool where you can write your tests and have instant feedback inside of your editor. So you're writing your test and the line goes green. If you look at your screenshot, you're seeing red and green lines. The green lines are the ones that are passing. The red lines are the ones that are failing.
Oh, it's pretty cool, right?
It's pretty cool. I use Quokka also a lot because if you want to do a quick prototype of something, you just start the JavaScript engine and you can type and you have instant feedback of what you're doing, which is a really nice way to work through something.
Oh, great. Just so that everybody knows, we just pick random people that are in our chat or ask questions at the end to Manfred. And DM me or one of the panelists, and we will send you the license. So our last meeting is next week already. It's around authorization. I mean, I need to say not authentication, but authorization. It's with Frederik Pruik. He's from OutZero, and he will guide us through all the things around authorization with Angular. So let me go back to our panelists. So today, I think you all seen him before. It's Sander. Sander, say hello.
Hello.
As always, Bjorn is also present there.
Hi, glad to be back again. Close to the end of the year.
Yeah, it's almost there. Where's your snow? I'm missing your snow, by the way, in your
I can turn
background.
it on. If you really want some snow, we can.
It's cold outside.
Sure. Yeah, it's cold outside. You're right. I'll keep it on.
And it's been a while, Stefan, that you were here, but welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Stefan.
So, and today our speaker, I'm really looking forward to this talk. I've seen him, I think, just once in a conference, and I've looked all his blogs, all his articles, because he writes a lot of technical things around Angular. It's Manfred. Hello, Manfred. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, great having you here. We're all looking forward. And well, I think our viewers also like the talk you're going to provide us. Would you like me to share your screen so that we can start with the talk?
Yeah, that would be great. So let's get started. So
yeah, there it is.
There it is. Guten Abend. I hope I pronounced it in the right way. And I did not insult someone by pronouncing it in the wrong way. So this is about the micro-frontend revolution, which is not a brutal revolution. It's hopefully a nice one. And it's about module federation with Angular. And I want to start with a nice picture, namely with this here. Perhaps you've seen it. It's a helicopter designed in 1400 something by Leonardo da Vinci. 1400 something. Back then, he already designed the helicopter. Well, he was only capable of designing it. He was not capable of building it because he lacked the right material. But nowadays, we have the right material, and scientists found out it really flies. How cool is this? And this story reminds me a bit to the current story of microfrontends. Because the idea of microfrontends has been around for several years, but we didn't have the right material to build it. And this will change now. But first of all, what do I mean when talking about microfrontends? Well, what I mean is that we are just subdividing a big application into tiny parts, into business domains, as you might call it, and those tiny parts are separate applications. And now you can assign different themes to those applications. Those themes can work in isolation, they can work independently, they can do their own decisions, they can deploy independently. And this makes everything more agile because they don't need to coordinate them a lot. So a nice idea. But the thing is, when you have several applications, somehow you want to load one application into another one. Let's say you have something like a shell here. The shell looks like your integrated application. And within this integrated application, you are loading this micro frontend, that micro frontend, or another micro frontend. In this case, we have a lot of tiny applications, but the user does not recognize. The user thinks, wow, this is one big integrated stuff. Well, the thing is, as mentioned before, this idea is quite old, but so far we didn't have the material, or to put it in another way, the right technologies to load a separately compiled application into a shell. But this is changing now with Module Federation, which was shipped with Webpack 5. Yeah, and this is what this talk is about. In this talk, I will tell you what Module Federation is about. I will show you how to combine it with Angular, and I will give you a roadmap so that you know when it's safe to get started with it. But first of all, let me also introduce myself. I am Manfred. I'm a trainer and consultant for Angular. I'm doing a lot of trainings. Most of them are focused on architectures for enterprise scale applications. And besides this, I'm quite connected to the Angular community. I live in Austria. This is where my accent comes from. I'm doing a lot of stuff in Germany, and I'm always happy if I can work with people from other countries, which is quite simple in times like this because everything takes place remotely, doesn't it? Okay, cool. So let's get started with Webpack 5 Module Federation. The big question this new technology is answering is how to load separately compiled code. And perhaps you say now, hey, Manfred, that cannot be that difficult because we have a dynamic import. So why not take a dynamic import to point to another application, to load something from over there? Well, in theory, that would work. In practice, it does not work because of all the bundlers out there. Bundlers like Webpack. Because all those bundlers assume that everything is known at compile time. Everything has to be known at compile time. Everything is compiled together. Everything is optimized together. Think about tree shaking. And then, and only then, it is cut into chunks for lazy loading. But this is too late for our purposes. We want to load something we did not know at compile time. We want to load something we only know at runtime. This is a big limitation of bundlers like Webpack, and that's why it's also a limitation of the CLI, of the Angular CLI, because the CLI is using Webpack underneath the covers. And this is now changed by Module Federation. When you go with Module Federation, you define two roles. The first role is the host. I call it the shell. And the second role is the remote. I call it the Microfrontend. You can configure both roles. For instance, you can tell the shell, hey, there is an URL. It is called MFE1, which stands here for Microfrontend 1, and it points over there to this other microfrontend. And over there, within this other microfrontend, I can expose stuff. I can say, hey, let's expose this Ivy component, this Angular module, or even this function. And now something beautiful happens. Now you can use a dynamic import using the mapped routes, the mapped URLs. And doing so, you can grab over to this microfrontend and load something from there. And the best thing about this is Angular does not even recognize. For Angular, this is just traditional lazy loading. That means you don't need to do anything in addition with Angular. The heavy lifting is done by Webpack underneath the covers. If Webpack sees this URL, it grabs over and it takes something from over there. How cool is that? Of course, the shell needs to have some metadata about the microfrontend. And for this, Webpack is generating a remote entry point when building the microfrontend. This remote entry file needs to be loaded into the shell. It gives the shell all the metadata it needs to know. It is not a big file, it is just a tiny JavaScript file with the most important information about the remote. The best thing about this is we can even share libraries. So let's say we have Angular core on this side, we have Angular core on that side. You can just configure everything to share Angular core. In this case, Angular core is only loaded once. And the microfrontend in this case will reuse it. That's really vital because let's assume we have 10 microfrontends. In this case, we do not want to load Angular 10 times. We just want to load Angular one time and to share it. It's really as easy as that. So this is more or less what module federation is doing. But now the big question is, how can we make Angular and especially the CLI work together with module federation? Well, I have a good message for you. The Angular CLI is already using Webpack behind the covers. This is the good message. But there is also a bad message, namely the Angular CLI is shielding Webpack from us. So we cannot really interact with it. And normally this is good because normally we don't want to get in touch with all the complexity of Webpack. You know, Webpack can really be complex, especially the Webpack configuration files. But in this case, we have a module federation configuration and somehow we want to tell Webpack to use it. So the big question is, how can we put this module federation configuration and give it to Webpack? The good question, the good answer here is there is an official solution for this. This official solution is called a builder. The Angular CLI is using builders underneath the covers to do its build tasks. For instance, there is a default builder delegating to Webpack when you build an application. And there is another builder delegating to ng packager when you want to build a library. So everything we need to do is to create a custom builder, which is squeezing in the module federation config into the Webpack configuration built by the Angular CLI. And then this custom builder can delegate to the default Webpack builder, and the default Webpack builder will do its job. It will just build everything with Webpack. Of course, you could handwrite such a builder, but you don't have to, because I already did this. I already wrote such a builder. It's called Angular Architect / Module Federation. To be more precise, this is not just a builder. At the end of the day, it does 3 things for you. The first thing is it generates the skeleton for a module federation config. That means you don't need to learn it by heart. You get the skeleton and you can just fill into the placeholders in the skeleton. That's the first thing. The second thing is it installs a custom builder which enables module federation underneath the covers. Plus, it assigns a new board for ng-serve so that you can ng-serve several module federation-based front-end side by side. The usage of it is, if you ask me, quite easy. Just ng-add it to your project, adjust the generated configuration, and then call ng-serve, and hopefully everything will work. I'm always saying module federation is a bit like the 1980s. You know, you need to experience them to know what they are about. And so let's start with a demonstration. In this demonstration, I brought 2 applications. Oh, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. This is because I played around with service workers today. So this is my cached version I've got by my service worker. So let me just unregister the service worker. Okay, it seems to be gone. Yeah, this is my application. This is my shell. And as you see here, the shell has just two roots. It has this home root saying welcome, and there is this flights root. And when I'm clicking flights, nothing happens because this is not implemented. Implementing this root is our task now. And the idea is to implement this in a way to make it load a completely different, separately compiled application like this one here. I want to load this separately compiled application into this root. Those two applications are really two different ones. For instance, if you look here, you see localhost 5000. Here we have localhost 3000. So first of all, let's have a look to the source code. When we have a look to the package JSON, we see that I'm already using Angular 11 and of course the Angular CLI 11. The bad message here is that Angular CLI 11 is still using Webpack 4. But we need Webpack 5 because with Webpack 5, module federation has been introduced. But the good message is we can force the CLI 11 into using Webpack 5. There is an opt-in solution. You just need to add those lines here. Those lines force the CLI into using Webpack 5. Well, not only the CLI, also the other libraries in here. Each and every library demanding upon Webpack is getting Webpack 5. The thing is, these lines here are only respected by Yarn. There are some special NPM packages, so you can also make this work with NPM, but out of the box, this is only supported by Yarn. It is not supported by NPM out of the box. So after installing all of this, you get CLI 11 plus Webpack 5. And now we can get started with the plugin I've told you before about. So for this, let me cancel this ng-serve task. And now let's say ng at Angular architects / module federation. It's downloading now, and then it will ask me two questions, namely, for which application in your monorepo, in your workspace, do you want to activate module federation? This is the first question. And the second question is, which board do you want to use together with this application for debugging purposes? So here I'm saying, hey, I want to enable my shell. And here I'm saying I want to use board 5000 for this shell. And now several stuff is generated. For instance, there is a Webpack configuration that is generated. It is not a full Webpack configuration. It only contains our module federation stuff. So you don't need to worry. The rest is still generated by the Angular CLI. And you also see the Angular JSON is modified because this ng-add task added the custom builder, which is enabling module federation underneath the covers. Let's do the same for the microfrontend. So let's ng-add Angular architects module federation. Now I want to enable my microfrontend 1, and I want to go with the board 3000. And one more time, the same stuff is generated for us. For instance, the Webpack configuration and the Angular JSON is modified to use our custom builder. Okay, now let's have a look into this Webpack config of our microfrontend 1. Let's go in here into the source code. Here we have this projects folder. Here we have microfrontend 1, and here is the Webpack config. So as mentioned before, it's not the full Webpack configuration. It only contains the stuff we need for module federation. And this is first and foremost the module federation plugin. Here I have two commands, one for remotes and one for hosts. Of course, I'm going with the one for remotes because this is my microfrontend 1. I'm defining the name of this microfrontend. I'm defining the file name of the remote entry file. You remember, this is the file with all the metadata. And I'm exposing some stuff. For instance, I want to expose a full module. It can be found here within flights, and it's my flights module PS. I don't need the section for the host, so let's get rid of it. Here I'm defining also that I want to share some libraries like Angular Core, Angular Common, and the router. On the slides before, you've seen the simplified version of this. The simplified version just takes an array with the names of the libraries I want to share. Something like this. Here I'm going with the advanced version. This advanced version allows me to define a configuration for each and every shared library. And this very configuration here tells us that there is only one Angular version allowed. At least one major version. That means if, let's say, one microfrontend is using Angular 9 and another microfrontend is using Angular 11, we would get an exception. We would get a runtime exception because this is not allowed here. And honestly, even though it's possible, having two different major versions of Angular within your system is probably not a good idea, because Angular is a stateful framework. Angular knows about your components and about your services. And somehow it would be a mess if one instance of Angular would know half of the components and another instance of Angular would know the second half of the components. Just think about using those components together would be really difficult, at least without web components. So if you want to mix and match different versions, go with web components. Well, if I wouldn't use strict version, I would only get a warning. I would only get a warning that this might cause some issues. In this case, module federation would just use the highest version. Let's say I have Angular 9 here, Angular 11 there. In this case, I would get Angular 11, it's the highest version, and I would get a runtime warning. Here, I'm getting the exception, fail fast. Okay, cool. This is the configuration of the micro frontend. Let's also have a look into this module file here. As you see here, this module file is a traditional Angular module with some child roots. And that's perfect, because that means I can load it with the shell's router using lazy loading. And after this, the shell can directly navigate to it. Okay, this was the side of the micro frontend. Now let's go on with the side of the shell. Let's have a look into the shell's configuration. Here we have a similar module federation config, and one more time, the most important stuff is in here within the parameters of the module federation plugin. For instance, here we have everything a remote needed to use. We can get rid of this because now we are configuring the shell, we are configuring the host. And I'm just telling the host that I want to access the URL mfe1, and it points to something over there, which is also called mfe1. And here I can even hard code the URL of this micro frontend. So let's go with localhost 3000. The thing is, you don't need to hard code your URL. I wouldn't do this for production. I like it for demonstrations. I like it for testing and for debugging, but I would not do this for production. For production, you would very likely go with something I'm calling dynamic federation, which means you are just calling a convenience function at runtime, something like load remote, and there you pass your URL. This is also something the plugin I wrote is capable of. It provides convenience function like this, and those convenience functions talk to the Webpack runtime API. Webpack is placing a little tiny runtime API in the window object so we can make use of it. Okay, so my host is pointing over to my remote and I'm sharing the same stuff. Now let's have a look into the roots of the shell. Here I have an app roots file. And here I can introduce a lazy root for flights. And it is just doing traditional lazy loading, at least from Angular's perspective. I'm importing something using this URL. Angular does not know that we are importing a microfrontend, but Webpack knows. Webpack looks at this URL and Webpack knows, oh, now I have to grab something from over there. But the thing is, TypeScript is not amused about this because TypeScript is saying, hey, I don't know this path, you know, because yeah, there is not a file with this name and TypeScript is about strict typing. And so TypeScript wants to make sure this works. But the thing is, this file does not exist at compile time. It will be available at runtime because Webpack will make sure of it. And so we need to ease the TypeScript compiler. For this, you just need a file which ends with DTS. The name does not matter. If the ending is DTS, then it will be picked up by the compiler and respected. And here we can say, hey, let's go with this name, TypeScript, please trust us. We are experts. This does not exist at compile time, but it will exist at runtime. And so Webpack is fine. You see, no compilation error anymore. Nice. So everything we did was a little tiny configuration on this side, a little tiny configuration on that side, and now we can lazy load the parts from the separately compiled, the separately deployed microfrontend. Shall we try it out? What do you think? Yeah, of course. Let's try it out.
Yes, please.
Yes, let's do it. So let's start the shell. And also let's start the microfrontend. Of course, you could use a script for starting both in parallel, but here I'm just doing it by hand. This also allows me to have a look at the output here. Concurrently is not producing such a nice output. And yeah, let's cross fingers so that everything works. Yeah, there are some warnings, but you know, warnings are for hazards. So this should be okay. And what do we have here? Here we have the same. Well, when we speak about warnings, the thing is the Webpack 5 integration into the CLI 11 is still experimental. That's why you will run into some pitfalls and you will get some warnings. So currently, this is great for trying everything out, for making sure that your architecture, your hypothesis about your architecture is working. But for production, this needs about, let's say, another 5 months. I guess with CLI 12, Webpack 5 will be well integrated. Okay, that looks nice. Let's have a look into our application. Let's reload it. Let's cross fingers. Let's press flights. And yeah, here we go. I've really loaded something that was separately compiled. Now let's find out what happens here. Let's have a look at our network tab. Let's reload everything. Let's clear this. Let's click flights. And here you see our bundle is lazy loaded. Just on demand, the other application is lazy loaded. But this is more as lazy loading because here we have localhost 3000. Here we go with localhost 5000. And also, this bundle only has 11.6 kilobytes. And this really proves that Angular is not duplicated here. This really proves that Angular is only loaded once and shared. So this looks quite nice, and this is especially a big deal for you if you want to scale your big application over several teams, because as mentioned in the beginning, now those teams can work independently. But of course, you are wondering now, what's about the roadmap? When can we use it? Well, the thing is, Webpack 5 is final since about 2 months. I guess it's exactly 2 months. Yeah, it was the 10th of October. So here we are on the safe side. CLI 11 is also final. But the thing is, the Webpack 5 integration into the CLI 11 is still experimental. And so for the time being, you will run into some pitfalls and issues. That's why I've mentioned before, currently it is more for trying everything out, for experimenting. Perhaps you just start with your experiment. Perhaps you start with 1 or 2 microfrontends, and you know that in several months you can integrate those 2 separate microfrontends using Webpack module federation. I guess with CLI 12, everything should work seamlessly, because the Angular team is not known for using alt dependencies. They want to just update everything to the newest versions. So if you like this talk, you will very likely also like my ebook. It's free, you can download it here, angulararchitect.co/book. This weekend, I published the 3rd edition of it, and now it has about 100 pages and about 4 chapters about module federation. It really covers a lot of stuff around module federation. Okay, let me come to a conclusion. We've looked into module federation. We've seen that it is really a game changer. It can really do for you something that was not possible before, at least not without dirty workarounds. We've seen it allows us to load separately deployed code, which is a great deal for microfrontends. Yeah, microfrontends, but also for plugin based solutions. You know, if you want to plug in some additional functionality in your existing application, then also microfrontends and module federations is the way to go. And we have seen we can combine everything with Angular thanks to a custom builder. And there is a last thing I want to tell you. If you forget about everything, please always remember this one last thing. Namely, now this is the time for you to become the next Leonardo da Vinci. So take your chance and try to get the next Leonardo. So thanks for having me one more time. I have uploaded all my material to my blog. You can download it here. And if you like, follow me on Twitter so that we can keep in contact.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
I thank you.
That was awesome. That was awesome. Great demo.
Thanks.
Yeah, great that you did it hands-on and everything went well and that kind of stuff. No problems with the
there's
demo
always
gods
a
there.
risk, you know, when you do live coding, there's always a risk.
I was going to say you had the pre-existing, what was it, the service worker? So I figured out that's the live demo part right there. That was brilliant.
Yeah, the funny thing is I
Beautiful
started everything up front and I did not even recognize that it's the wrong application. So yeah, it's live.
Handled it beautifully.
So let's see, there are a lot of questions I've seen, and several we already tried to answer them.
Engaging in the discussion already, yeah.
Yeah, and let me see what a good one is. So I think a lot of it already goes by how the version management will be, like the dependencies, and are they compiled together? So for example, Jon Knoops, he asked this. There were several others that had similar things.
Yeah, of course. It's an important topic, and perhaps it's also a nice story, because only because of this, because of better version management, module federation was implemented twice. The founder of Webpack implemented it another time because he figured that he needs a better story for version management. So perhaps I can show one more time a slide I've shown before.
Sure, I put your screen already.
So let's say we are sharing, let's say, Angular core. We have Angular core on both sides. By default, did I share it? Yeah. Yeah, everything is good. By default, what Module Federation is doing is Module Federation is looking at the version provided here. It is looking at the version provided there, and it tries to go with the highest compatible version. So let's assume we have on the one side, let me take my notepad. Let's assume we have on the one side Angular 10.0, and on the other side we have Angular 10.1. In this case, Module Federation will figure out that 10.1 is the highest compatible version, and so it will go with this version. Let's say it would be the other way around. Here we have 10.0 and here we have 10.1. In this case also, Module Federation will figure out at runtime that 10.1 is the highest compatible version, and so it will also take this one. Now it's provided by the shell, before it was provided by the Microfrontend. To make this possible, we need this metadata at runtime. This metadata needs to be loaded upfront. It's not a big deal. It's just a tiny file. And by looking at the metadata, Module Federation knows which part, which microfrontend, which shell is providing which version. And so it can negotiate about the version and go with the highest compatible one. The thing is, if there is not the highest compatible version, then we really have an issue. So let's assume we have Angular 11 there and Angular 10 there. By default now, we would get both versions by default. And that means we have two versions of Angular, which is not exactly the best idea because, you know, it's stateful and so on. If Angular was not a stateful framework, that wouldn't be a big issue. Let's think about our XJS or underscore. Well, it's not perfect because it increases the bundle sizes, but having, let's say, RX6 here and RX7 beta there is not a big deal. They will not influence each other. With Angular, it is. And that's why they have several options to configure the behavior of Module Federation when it figures out that there is not a single highest compatible version. And that's why you can use those settings I've shown before. Let's have a look into the Webpack config. Things like this, where you say, hey, only go, what's happening here? Only go with the highest version and give me a warning, or just give me an exception if there is not a single highest compatible version. Those are your options, basically. Well, honestly, there is also another option. You could say, yes, I know there is not a highest compatible version, but let's be cool, because I know my application works with Angular core. Required version with Angular core between version 10 and version 11. I've tested it. Officially, it does not work, but I've tested it. It works seamlessly. This would also be another option of relaxing.
So we can just use this one in production, right?
Well, not without heavy end-to-end testing, I guess.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, when you look at Angular, not much changed between Angular 9 and Angular 11 in the core. So it would be very likely to make this work, but no guarantees, you know.
Yeah, so I think this answers the question we had basically for a lot of people, and I think there was an interesting one. Let me see. Will this be the end of Angular Elements? Because I think a lot of people, well, they had their mind like, okay, Angular Elements will solve this problem, you know, micro-frontends basically, or a part of it. I think a lot of people had that. And this is, well, this is another approach at least.
Yeah. I don't think that it will be the end of Angular elements, but I think the question comes because there is some overlapping in the feature set. Something can be accomplished by both. I would say if you want to mix and match different versions, if you really want to mix and match Angular 10 and Angular 11, then wrapping it into a web component is the way to go. Of course, this comes with some disadvantages. You are increasing the bundle sizes. You load 2 versions of Angular into the browser. That's not perfect, but it works. I have done it several times. Especially in big companies, this is always a big question because they have a lot of teams and they don't want to coordinate each other. Another thing is some of my customers want to provide, let's say, a design system, a component library for a design system. And they want to support different Angular teams in their company, and they could also have different Angular versions. In this case, going with Angular elements is also a good idea. Of course, there is this little tiny overhead because Angular is loaded, but if this is not a big deal for you, then it is a nice approach.
Probably also, if you wanted to use it with other frameworks, inject your Angular element to something else, or even to CMS.
Also in dynamic HTML, Angular elements will work where this will not work. So there is a different use case.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I saw another question that I found interesting, and I saw 2 questions, and they are basically the same. Michael asked if you can use the service injector from the main application. That's the question. Into your child.
Yeah. So what you can do is you can use the injector from the shell. The only thing you need to do is to share your token, your dependency injection token. You could put it into a shared library.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool.
And then
playing around with, yeah.
Because
and then there is.
It's the same as lazy loading, you know. And if it works with lazy loading, I will also work with module federation.
That's interesting to think about. Cool.
And then a follow-up question by someone else, I don't know by who, is how about shared state between the shell application and one of the child applications, which is basically the same, I think.
Yeah. As you say, it's the same. Just put your state management facility. It might be a service with a behavior subject. It might be some stored solution into a shared library, and you are fine. And the thing is, the shared library does not need to be an NPM package. Most of the demonstrations are using NPM packages, but it could also be a library of your mono repository.
Really promising things in there, man. Cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I saw a question about your book, and so I'm putting it here.
Very good
so Tom White asked if he needs to buy your book and if it then will be updated.
The thing is, you don't need to buy it because it's for free. And yeah, I'm updating it because this topic in general, enterprise architectures are my main topic. And so I'm always updating it to the newest version.
Okay, great. So I don't know if anybody else from the panel have a other question. I see Sander has.
Is there any additional memory pressure by doing it this way instead of making it like one big application?
Let me think about it. Yeah. There is a drawback. The thing is that if you share a library, you cannot tree shake it because you don't know what other parts of your system know from this library. Everything is compiled separately. So tree shaking is here disabled for Angular Core, Angular Common, and the Angular router. This is the drawback.
Yeah, so for a really big application, it's not a big deal unless they have a boatload of their own libraries that they are not using anymore. But the Angular stuff is used anyway, somewhere.
Yeah, the core is pretty optimized in that sense, so might be looking at specific RxJS stuff maybe that nobody uses, but still has to be compiled because some part might be using it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the issue.
Yeah.
Offenders say if it is a big application, perhaps it mainly runs in the intranet. It's not that a big deal. But yeah, if loading performance, if starting performance is a big deal for you, then I would think twice about this.
Well, server-side rendering, then, eh?
No, about sharing libraries with module federation.
Okay, so I just saw a last question before we will announce the giveaways is what would you recommend besides of your own book to do a deep dive into module federations? Do you have some like good resources or?
Yeah, so the thing is not much has been written about it because it's quite a new technology. And also the official documentation could use some love. So if you need an open source project during the holidays, you can think about this. Well, one thing I really like is there is a repository with examples using module federation. It is using a huge amount of examples. If you search for GitHub and module federation, you will find it. The owner of this repository is, I write it to the chat, perhaps you can write it to the people, is Zach Jackson. Yeah, Zach Jackson. And yeah, he is the original contributor of this, of module federation. And yeah, in his repo, you will find a huge amount of examples.
Okay, great. So now it's a fun moment for our viewers because we're going to do the giveaway, and we talked on the Slack channel with the panelists, and we're going to do two giveaways, and the one we had three, and we're going to remain one for the last meetup next week so that everybody has something. So I'm going to put the people on screen. Let me double check. Yeah, so I think he's a long member of the Dutch Angular group, as far as I know. So Joris, you have won the Wallaby JS license. If you already have it, let us know. But otherwise, send us a DM, contact one of us, and we will provide it to you. And great to have you back, by the way. And the other one is Jon Knoops. He will get the Quokka license from us. So please contact us via DMs, email, or every other channel we have, and we will hook you up with the license. So Manfred, thank you very much for your talk. I really appreciate it. Would love to have you back for next year, maybe in a conference then. Let's hope we can sit together again in a room. And well, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
See you next time.
Dankjewel. Goodbye.
Alsjeblieft.